So it's basically a process. It's kind of that where you get out of it what you put into it. You put in a lot more time into the process, you tend to get a better credit. And then so like a firm like a Blackline Group, we're not an accounting firm, so we will work with your CPA firm or any CPA firm that doesn't do the R&D work to make sure that there's effective implementation and use of the R&D tax credit. So as I said at the beginning, 3 things you want to look at. Can you generate a meaningful credit? And obviously what's going to determine if it's meaningful is the amount of qualified spending that you have taking place within your business. Second thing you want to look at is if and when the credits can be used, because just because you can generate a credit doesn't mean you can actually get immediate benefit from it. Now, and some of the instances where you might not get immediate benefit is, if you're a C Corp and you have a loss, then you can't use a tax credit to reduce your tax liability lower because your tax liability can't go any lower when you have a loss. So in those cases, any situation where you can't use a federal credit, you don't lose it. You first look back your prior year to see if you could have used a credit in that year, and then if not, the federal credit carries forward for 20 years. So you do not lose the credit. So, but in some situations, like with flow-through entities like S Corps, it's not uncommon, as Brian was saying, in his situation, I think he said LLC, but you have shareholders nonetheless. The credit flows through directly to the shareholders, but in some cases the shareholders are impacted by what's called the alternative minimum tax, which again prevents somebody from getting immediate benefit from the credit, but again, you don't lose it, you carry it forward with you. Number of shareholders can also impact whether it makes sense to do something with the credit. That tends to be more in looking back. If you have a nice opportunity, let's say you could generate $50,000 of credits per year, and you want to look to your 3 prior years, but you have 10 shareholders, $5,000, and let's say they all have equal ownership. Well, $5,000 per individual may not necessarily be enough to get people intrigued to want to go back and amend the returns, but absolutely you should be, looking at the credit on a go-forward basis. And yes, sir.
I can just tell you when the first year we did that, it really benefited some shareholders more than others. I was hit hard with the AMT.
Okay.
And so I got no benefit out of it the
Right.
first year.
Immediately. Right, but you didn't lose them, and then you carried them forward.
As long as we can keep making money, then
Right. Right.
But if you don't make money, you don't get it back either.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, the third thing we talked about is can you document? And we're going to talk a little bit more about documentation in a second. And I'll be wrapping up. So again, about the credit, it's been around for a long time. The credit did expire at the end of '09. Has not yet been extended for 2010, but all indications are that the credit will get extended. The credit has become more popular over the last 5 to 7 years because there's been more education around the R&D tax credit. When something becomes more popular, more people start taking advantage of it. And so what's happened in the last couple of years is the R&D tax credit has become a Tier 1 issue with the IRS. I don't tell you that to scare you. I just tell you that because you need to understand what the environment is. What happened is as more companies became knowledgeable of the opportunity, more companies went back and amended their prior 3 years, which meant that the government was sending a lot of refund checks back to businesses. They also noticed that a lot of people were taking very aggressive positions with their R&D tax credit. So when people started abusing a system, that gets the IRS's attention, and it became a Tier 1 issue. And so, again, you shouldn't be afraid to take advantage of the credit. As long as you take a solid approach, you will be fine. But what you need to understand since becoming a Tier 1 issue, there are certain things that have gotten more attention from the IRS. Going back and amending prior year's returns tends to get more attention from the IRS. We've seen no increase whatsoever on audits of a timely filed return only, but we've seen more audit activity with amended returns. So if you for your company would consider wanting to go back now and amend your prior years, and you have a good opportunity, if it's a meaningful number and you have good documentation, you shouldn't be afraid to do it. You just need to know what the potential risks are of amending a return, and that is it could get audited. Okay, but again, you should not take advantage of the credit just because as long as you take a solid approach, take advantage of the credit. This is the bottom line. But what did happen a couple years ago in becoming a Tier 1 issue, the IRS came out with what's known as the Audit Technique Guide, and they basically gave guidance more, raised the bar in the amounts of documentation that they wanted to see. Okay, so really, the key is you have to show the nexus or the connection between your qualified research expenditures and your qualified research activities. That's really what they want to see. They'll just say, they won't argue that you were doing R&D, they'll just say, prove it. And so you're going to want to be able to have certain types of tracking systems to track your costs and expenses and wages. And here's another laundry list of things that you can use to document your R&D tax credit. So to your question before, if your documentation that you're going to have going forward is probably going to be better than what you have had in the past. Usually we can find enough different sorts of documentation to substantiate a current claim, but as part of the process, almost every company strengthens their tracking systems in order to better document those credits on a go-forward basis. So again, you can look at all this laundry list of things, and you can probably find many of these things that can help substantiate a claim. So reading the small print again, the opportunity is not only timely, but also your prior open tax years. The credit cannot be used to reduce what's called the tentative minimum tax, or AMT, as I just talked about before, and any unused credits that carry back 1 year and forward for 20. So action steps, at a minimum, if you should always think about evaluating or utilizing the R&D tax credit on your timely filed return. I would say if you're a calendar year company, if you're a 12/31 year-end company, and your return is on extension right now and you've not yet filed by September 15th or whenever you file, you might still want to take a look at getting the credit on that timely filed return. And then you can also evaluate whether it makes sense to go back to those prior years, and what will determine that, as I said before, is can you get immediate benefit from going back and generating credits, and do you have good documentation? And then finally, put in place a process to track all your R&D costs on a go-forward basis, so you have that better documentation in the future. So, in summary, there's substantial amounts of dollars that are not being taken advantage of, that are being left on the table. This is a valid tax planning opportunity. Even if you're claiming a credit, if you've not been taken, if you want to call it the study approach or a really comprehensive approach, you may be leaving dollars on the table. Even if you have been using the credit in the past, if you've not updated your methodology since the credit became a Tier 1 issue, you might want to take a look at that as well, just updating your process. And again, the key to the credit, what the IRS likes to see, document your activities while you're doing them. Don't wait till you get to the end of the year and then try to go back. I mean, you can, but you're going to have much fresher, you're going to have better notes and better documentation if you document that stuff as you do the activities. So with that being said, there's my contact information. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact me. And I'm going to turn this over to Ryan now, because I know we're going a little bit over my time. I cut into Ryan's a few minutes, so I apologize, Ryan.